You can't handle the truth. That's what he said. You can't handle the truth. We all remember the movie, right? An Officer and a Gentleman. See, the problem is we seem to have forgotten the idea that there is a truth. Not just a notion of truth, but an absolute truth. I was watching a video clip, one of those on the streets interviews, and a guy was brave enough to set himself up with a small stage and a sound system and a microphone on the stage and a microphone in the crowd on a college campus. And he began preaching the Word of God, just teaching straight out of the Bible, and then allowing people to come up and ask him questions and challenge him. And a young woman walked up, very articulate, very intelligent, had all of her ducks in a row, so to speak, knew exactly what it is that she had to say. And she went on for about 5 or 6 minutes, berating him about the idea that there were still homeless people, there were still poor people, there were still people with injustice, there were still people who were not getting what they wanted. Meanwhile, he was busy judging her lifestyle and telling her that she couldn't live the way that she wanted to. And she said, why don't you get down off your stage, because Jesus never took a stage? Why don't you stop telling me how to live my life, because Jesus never told me how to live my life? Why don't you go feed the poor, because that's what Jesus would have done? And she went on for probably 5 or 6 minutes telling him how to be a Christian. Now, everything that she said was laced with profanity. Her choice of lifestyle was clear and obvious. She made it clear and obvious in the way that she said it, talking about her choice of sexual relationship. Her education level was obviously pretty advanced. She knew all that there was to know about how he was supposed to be a Christian, but it was obvious that her label or expectation of a Christian and what she saw in him didn't match. You ever suffered that inconvenience that someone looks at you and goes, well, if you were a better Christian, you'd do this? And you think to yourself, well, if I was a giraffe, I might eat the tops of the trees as well, but I'm not a giraffe, and I don't know where you get that definition of a Christian for me to live up to that standard. I'm not sure what definition that is. Now, here's the irony. They were first called Christians at Antioch, but the children of God, those who call on the name of God, have been under the same fire for thousands of years. For thousands of years, what the world thought the children of God would look like and do and behave like and say and teach and allow or not allow has not been different. Nor has God's expectation of us, with one exception. And that is before the cross and after the cross, the difference between living by the law and then living by grace is a change in mindset. Jesus didn't come to do away with the law. He came to fulfill it, to meet every expectation of it, so that by receiving him, we're not under the penalty of the law. That doesn't mean that the mandates of God, the expectations of God, shouldn't drive our behavior, our relationships, our decision-making, our priorities, the way that we treat other people, the decisions that we make with our finances. All of those things should be driven by what God said was the right thing, not by the way that your boss, your friend, your neighbor, your coworker, your children tell you to live. That's a hard one. Those are hard truths. To think that of all the people in the world telling me the right way to live my life, what I should do, when I shouldn't do it, that the God of the universe has an expectation on me for the way that I should live my life, that many of them don't know because they've never read the Word. They've never looked it up. They've never asked him, what do you expect of us? Instead, they have these religious notions. They have these ideologies that they've kind of made up on their own. And as they make them up on their own, they share them with one another. The scribes and the Pharisees, they had kind of the same problem. You know, Moses came back down from the mountain with 10 commandments. I don't know if you've ever looked at that mountain, but the mountain that he climbed and then came back down, that's about a 3,200-foot descent from what I understand. That's a pretty significant climb, and he came back down with 2 stone tablets. I don't care if you're walking on a paved path with ropes on either side. That's a lot of hiking to get up and down that mountain. He came back down with those 2 stone tablets, and they had on them how many commandments? 10. 10 guiding principles, 10 mandates, 10 really good ideas from God. 10 sets of instruction around which, like a skeleton, the rest of the walk with God could be built. But the Pharisees added some 600 plus new rules, ideas, and notions to those 10 and said, well, you can do it like that, but you also have to do this and this and this and this and this. It's okay if you brush your teeth, but you got to do it with this kind of toothpaste on this kind of toothbrush, and only with your right hand, and only while you're standing on your right foot, and only while you're whistling a song. And some of the rules and regulations added by humans to the laws of God are absolutely ridiculous. And yet we try to live by them. Unfortunately, many people today don't know the original 10 commandments. In the same video clip, or right behind that video clip, I saw a young lady standing out there with 2 photographs of former presidents. One was a former president, one was the current, today's, vice president. Asking people on a college campus, these are our best and our brightest. Do you know who these 2 people are? And less than 5% could tell them that's Joe Biden or that's Ronald Reagan. Many people called Reagan Nixon. They're not learning our history. They're not learning anything about that. If they are, they're not retaining it. You know what's funny, though? Every single one, 100% of them, recognized a photo of Kim Kardashian. They all knew who Kim Kardashian was. They didn't know who the vice president was. These are the same people who are protesting in the streets to have greater rights. They don't understand our political process. They don't understand our government structure. They don't understand who is our government leaders. But they want to protest about not getting their way, about throwing a temper tantrum, about not hearing what's true, just hearing what they want to hear. Well, is that a new idea? Has that only been the college-age kids of the 2000s or the 2010s or the 1990s or 80s or 70s or 60s or 50s? No, it goes way, way, way back. Way, 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 way. Let's throw a couple thousand ways on there. In fact, let's go here to Amos, a little known book in the book. Raw truth is never popular. Woe to you who turn justice to vinegar and stomp righteousness into the mud. Do you realize where you are? That's an odd question, is it not? Do you realize where you are? Well, let's back up a little bit. He says, the city that marches out 100 will end up with 10, O family of Israel. God's message to the family of Israel, seek me and live. Don't fool around with those shrines of Bethel. Don't waste time taking trips to Gilgal. And don't bother going down to Beersheba. Gilgal is here today and gone tomorrow. Bethel is all show and no substance. So seek God and live. You don't want to end up with nothing to show for your life but a pile of ashes and a house burned to the ground. God will send such a fire, and the firefighters will show up too late. Woe to you who turn justice into vinegar and stomp righteousness into the mud. Do you realize where you are? Now, the answer seems a little flippant, but it's not. He says, you're in the cosmos. You're in a cosmos. A cosmos. Okay, well, I thought when you said, do you know where you are, you might be meaning like in the U.S. or in Texas or in the Dallas area or at my address. No, he says, you're in a cosmos. That's pretty big. But then he follows that to say, you're in a cosmos star-flung with constellations by God. A world God wakes up each morning and puts to bed each night. God dips the water from the ocean and gives the land a drink. God revealed, does all this, and he can destroy it as easily as he makes it. He can turn this vast wonder into a total waste. People hate this kind of talk. Raw truth is never popular, but here it is, bluntly spoken. Because you run roughshod over the poor and take the bread right out of their mouths, you're never going to move into the luxury homes that you've built. You're never going to drink wine from the expensive vineyards that you planted. I know precisely the extent of your violations, the enormity of your sins, and it's appalling. You bully right living people, taking bribes right and left and kicking the poor when they're down. Justice is a lost cause. Evil is epidemic. Decent people throw up their hands, protest, and rebuke are useless. It's a waste of breath. Seek good and not evil and live. You talk about God, God of the angel armies, being your best friend. Well, live like it, and maybe it'll happen. Hate evil and love good. Then work it out in the public square. Maybe God, the God of angel armies, will notice your remnant and be gracious. Go out into the streets and lament loudly. Fill the malls and the shops with cries of doom. Weep loudly, not me, not us, not now. Empty offices, stores, factories, workplaces. Enlist everyone in the general lament. I want to hear it loud and clear when I make my visit, God's decree. Woe to all of you who want God's judgment day. Why would you want to see God? Why would you want him to come now? When God comes, it will be bad news before it's good news. The worst of times, not the best of times. Here's what it's like. A man runs from a lion right into the jaws of a bear. A woman goes home after a hard day's work and is raped by a neighbor. At God's coming, we face hard reality, not fantasy, a black cloud with no silver lining. I can't stand your religious meetings. I'm fed up with your conferences and conventions. I want nothing to do with your religious projects, your pretentious slogans and goals. I'm sick of your fundraising schemes, your public relations and image making. I've had all I can take of your noisy ego music. When was the last time you sang to me? Do you know what I want? I want justice, oceans of it. I want fairness, rivers of it. That's what I want, and that's all I want. Didn't you, dear family of Israel, worship me faithfully for 40 years in the wilderness, bringing the sacrifices and offerings I commanded? How is it you've stopped dragging gimrak statues of your so-called rulers around, hauling them? How is it that you've stooped to dragging the gimrak statues of your so-called rulers around, hauling the cheap images of your star gods here and there? Since you like them so much, you can take them with you when I drive you into exile beyond Damascus. Well, why do I bring such a heavy message today? I think the reality is that we're beginning to lose sight when we cry out to God and say, God, I want justice on him. God, I want you to make revenge on him or her or them or that. Like the woman standing in the square berating the man for how he lived his Christian life, all the while she's judging him. What she's accusing him of is judging her. She wants him to get down off of his high horse and go do something for the poor. What has she done for the poor? She wants him to get out off of his high horse and stop judging her for her lifestyle. What has she done for her lifestyle? And I think our society is rife today with those who would point at injustice in other places and accuse one another of living a false life, of living a lie, of declaring the truth to be one thing and living out something else. I think our society is overrun and overwhelmed with those who cannot simply live the life they've been called to. They haven't individually had a relationship with God in a while, but they want to cry out to others. So why this heavy message now? Because it's Christmas. Yes, because it's Christmas. Well, what's the relationship between the two? Well, there's two major connections between those people who want to live the life they want to live and cry out for God's judgment on everybody else, and the word, the message, the words of Amos. Have you noticed every Christmas holiday season, families come back together, and there's one of two things that happens in a household during the holidays. In fact, there's all kinds of social justice ideologies that are floating in our public conversation today. And many people have said, well, when you get back with your family, especially those of the older generation, just don't bring up politics and religion because you're guaranteed to disagree, so just don't talk about it. That, my friend, is not how problems are solved. It might be a way to avoid conflict. And if you can't cope with conflict, if you can't find a resolution, if you're not willing to give any ground and they're not willing to give any ground, and conflict is all that's coming, and I guess avoiding conflict is the best thing you can do. But if there's any chance at all that coming together for the holidays, that showing up at church for that once or twice a year, the Easter and Christmas weekend, if there's any chance at all that God could speak to someone's heart and challenge them, maybe through a Christmas song that they haven't heard in years. There's a video that I've shared on my Facebook page of singing contractors, where two guys are putting in door jambs and door frames and hanging new doors in a house they're remodeling. And someone challenges them to sing the song, "Mary, Did You Know?" And so they go into the garage and they sing it. And they have incredible voices and they do a phenomenal job of it. But that song moves people. The meaning of the lyrics of that song, the reality that a human woman with no concept of what was coming next obediently accepted to be the carrier of God himself, to deliver a little baby. And as the song puts it, that her little baby would soon deliver her, that child would walk on water, that he would calm the storms with his hand, that he would raise the dead and speak life. That little baby, that's what Christmas is about. And while Christmas is about the beauty that is the birth of God in the womb of a woman, it is also about the reality that we can't handle the truth. If any one of us, without the cross, had to stand before an almighty God and justify our decisions, our choices, our behaviors, the things that we've done in our life, we would fall miserably short of good enough to even have the conversation. If we walked into the presence of God with the type of life that we live, independently, individually, not your church, not your family, not your society, not your culture, not your race, not your nationality, you one-on-one will answer before God and nobody else. You don't get to take anybody with you to argue for you. You don't get to take any testimonials with you to say how good you are. You don't get to go with a press release and say, "But God, I did this." There will be no sales pitch before God. He knows every thought that's ever crossed your mind, good and bad. He knows every deed you've ever done with your hands, with your feet, with your mouth, with your lips, good and bad. He knows everything you've ever stolen and every gift you've ever given, every one of them, good and bad. And you alone, face to face, one-on-one with God, will stand in judgment for every decision. He also doesn't care about your religion. Doesn't care what church you went to, what faith you held on to, what lie you lived by or under or with or taught. He cares about one thing and one thing only. He is the God of the cosmos, Yahweh. He is the one who put it all in motion, and he's the one who will bring it to a stop. And when he does, and we stand in judgment before him, we will be thankful that that young teenage girl gave birth to Emmanuel that day in a manger. We'll look back thousands of years from now and go, had it not been for that intersection of humanity and divinity, without that moment, there would have been no cross. And without that cross, there would be no hope for any human being to stand before the wrath of a judging God. Judgment of individuals is harsh enough. When we do something that hurts someone and our family comes down on us, or our culture comes down on us, or our society comes down on us, our friends and neighbors come down on us, that's harsh. We don't like true words sometimes. It doesn't feel nice to not get our way. But the expectations of a holy God are so much higher than any legal expectation, any relational expectation, any religious expectation, any cultural expectation you've ever tried to face. Dress codes at work. Which sign on the bathroom door is appropriate for you? What company do I want to work for so that I can work less, get paid more, and have an earlier retirement? Those harsh decisions that come down on us, those choices in life that we have to make and then deal with, are nothing compared to the holiness of God. And without that little baby in a manger, there would be no reconnection between fallen humanity and the holiness of divine God. But because of that baby, there is a way. Because of that baby, we can stand before an almighty God without all of our excuses and simply say, "But I'm yours because." Society will judge you. It's guaranteed. Society will even judge you based on their own misunderstanding of what you say you believe. Get in the Word. Find out what He says. Find out what He believes. Find out what He expects of you. And then forget what everybody else thinks. I know that's harsh. It's a truth. Forget the little gods of your paycheck or your fame or your fortune or your identity. Remember whose you are and who you are in him. And if that's still a question, do I have a relationship with God? Will I stand before him in judgment and know that that baby is standing in my place? Will I know that the Christ who climbed up on the cross willingly has paid the price for me to stand in front of a holy God and not be judged eternally? If you don't know the answer to that question, send me a private message. I'll be glad to have a conversation with you. But I'm going to tell you right now, the day is coming. The day is coming. I don't know if it's next month, next year, or next millennium. But it's coming because he promised it is. And we look for that judgment when we are frustrated with others. We want them to pay the price. We want injustice for them. All that means is we don't understand what true justice looks like. If we understood what hell was like, we wouldn't want anybody to be there. Paul said, I would be willing that I should perish for eternity than that anyone else would have to do it. It's exactly what took that baby Jesus to the cross. It said he knew the anguish that was coming. He could feel it in his bones when he cried and sweat great drops of blood. He knew the anguish that was before him, but he faced it with joy because of you. Because he knew the judgment that was coming as well. To run from a lion into the mouth of a bear. To come home from work to find yourself the victim of rape. That's what God compares it to. We leave the harsh judgment of our religious surroundings and our cultural surroundings and our societal surroundings and run headlong into the face of a holy God whose expectations are so much higher. My best advice is this: stop worrying about the judgment of the world, the criticism of culture, the sinewy abdications of our society. They want to let go of the wrong things and hold on to the wrong things. You need to be worried about the holiness of God and the judgment that is imminent in him. Christmas is an incredible time of year. It's great for families to get back together, to go shopping. I love to sit. I don't like to do a lot of shopping, but I love to sit by the Christmas tree and watch the families and watch the kids play in the fake snow and watch the kids run around and the joy that's in their heart over this season. And I can only imagine what it will be like that day in heaven when we see our loved ones again. When we recognize all of those that we weren't certain we would see again. When we realize they made it past the judgment. How awesome that day will be. Like Christmas morning under the tree. Because the greatest gift that has ever been given is a release from sin. A release from the judgment of this world. I'm J Loren Norris, and you've been watching Tell It Like It Is TV. Have a blessed day.